Okay, thanks for joining us. We are here for another edition of Operation Gladio meets Secret Society with WarHamster Brady. How are you today, Brady?
I'm doing great. We finally got our first day in the 80s, and hopefully my air conditioning units arrive today, so I don't turn into a complete sauna up here in the loft. But
So, yeah, we're all having air conditioning issues. um, it's been quite a trip so far, but I'm definitely enjoying getting out and seeing the country. And the air conditioning can always be a challenge, especially when we went out day before yesterday and got in the truck to drive around Montgomery, Alabama, and it was 117 degrees inside the truck.
no, thank you. It's so weird here. I mean, I actually had my space heater going 2 weeks ago, and now I've got to get the AC. So I'm not used to it. I don't think I ever will be.
And just so that the audience knows, Brady's in New Hampshire, and he spent most of his life in San Diego.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a system shock. But I will be possibly. We just made plans to make our trip down to both Florida and Orange Beach, Alabama. We're looking at moving to the Panhandle of Florida or Orange Beach, Alabama, sometime in the next year or so. So that we are.
And I was sharing with WarHamster that we are concluding this trip in Orange Beach, Alabama, because it is one of my favorite destinations. Love going there.
Well, we'll be checking it out. I think sometime in the fall, September, October.
And I told him Mike's Steakhouse, for anyone ever visiting Orange Beach, Alabama, is a must on the restaurant list.
Yeah, we checked it out online. We'll be there.
Yes.
My wife is a huge lover of steak, so
she will not be disappointed. I can promise her that.
Very good. Shall we jump into it? Oh,
absolutely.
I am wearing today, I don't know if you could read it, Everybody's Essential. There's a T-shirt from back when we were in 2020 fighting against the California's lockdowns for COVID. And I'm wearing this in honor of a good friend who is very active down there and fighting against all kinds of injustice in San Diego. So I thought I'd show a little support for my San Diego people. It's called from a group called Reopen San Diego.
Awesome.
Okay, I don't see anybody in the chat today. Say hello if you're there, people, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, just give them a minute. They'll show up.
Very good. So today we are doing part 2, looking into Skull and Bones alumni, Judge James Jeb Boasberg. Let's put him up on screen real quick. There you are, James.
Oh, there's my Swedish Tomei, I guess is how you say his name. Tony, maybe. Yeah, so they're there.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I remember Mr. Heghammer. I've seen him in the chat. Good comments.
Yes, he's awesome.
All right. So last week we covered Judge Boasberg's background, and really he's the son of a bureaucrat and grew up in D.C., went to D.C.'s most exclusive private high school, and we talked about all the alumni of St. Albans School and how they just grow up to be the gatekeepers and work for, it appears, the alumni of the New England private boarding schools, and they all go to the Ivy League schools, join groups like Skull and Bones. And if you think we live in a democracy where anybody can rise to power, you're thinking wrong, because we've been demonstrating that it really is an insider's club. And Boasberg is one of those guys. And you're going to see that his rapid rise to prominence was no coincidence. So, shall we?
Yes, let's go.
Okay, so Boasberg graduates St. Albans School, goes to Yale undergrad, becomes Skull and Bones, class of, I believe, 1985. He plays basketball at Yale. He's about 6'6". Very commanding presence. I looked up his basketball statistics. He was a bench warmer, but he did play. Then after Yale, he goes over to Oxford University, of course, and he gets a Master's of Studies in Modern European History, which is interesting to me because modern European history to me is all about the EU and globalism. They've been rewriting their real history. Gets a job, works as a history teacher and a women's basketball coach at a school in New York City known as the Horace Mann School.
No way.
Yep. For those of you who don't remember, the Horace Mann School is one of those private elite boarding schools we talked about earlier that's got all kinds of interesting alumni. And he that was his job right out of college.
And all kinds of interesting scandals.
Oh, yeah. In fact, real quick, let me just remind everyone of some of their alumni. Give me 1 second. I'll find that.
And what's interesting is that seems to be a common theme where the staff, which is interesting that he becomes part of the staff, has inappropriate relationships with some of the student bodies. And even when some of these scandals get out, they do a lot of cover up as it relates to these scandals because of the prestige of these schools. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll be right back on camera. Hang on 1 second. I got to sneeze. So talk a little bit more for a second, if you don't mind.
Some of the commonalities, and again, that's why you find people like Jeffrey Epstein associating with these schools. And we remember the whole Donald Barr association, William Barr's father with Jeffrey Epstein. And so all of this ties into what we're living today, obviously, with this gentleman as well.
Yeah, and as a reminder, some of the Horace Mann alumni we went over. First one, of course, is Bill Barr, the Attorney General, Donald Trump's Attorney General.
Speaking of which.
We got the Blinkens. Who else do we have on there? Ray Cohn went there. A guy got the name of Danzig, who was a advisor to the Rockefellers. A few other big ones here. Just going down the list real quick. I'm James Murdoch, son of Rupert Murdoch. Gideon Rose, David Lyle Boren. There's a few other fun ones. It was a great list. Paul Bremer went there. Humphrey Bogart. And there's another big one here I wanted to mention, Tim Draper. Anyway, getting back to Mr. Boasberg. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so at Yale Law School, he's a classmate and roommate of none other than Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. So Kavanaugh's a DC insider too.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, Kavanaugh also played basketball, but he only played on the Yale JV team. He never made the varsity. He would play basketball with a professor by the name of George Priest, who is the sponsor of the school's Federalist Society. If you've listened to my Federalist Report series, I am very critical of the Federalist Society and the judges they choose. But that's how Kavanaugh became a Federalist Society judge, and that's who recommended him to Donald Trump. A little bit more on Kavanaugh. He would work with Ken Starr at the independent counsel's office. Ken Starr, of course, is the guy who was going after Clinton. He was colleagues with a couple of well-known names, Rod Rosenstein and Alex Azar.
And so just for my audience, remember we did the whole expose of CV Star, the Chinese guy that created AIG, and his relationship with Ken Starr. So there's connections here everywhere.
Yeah, and what you're going to see is this is DC swamp. It's not Republican. It's not Democrat. This is these people all come from the bureaucracy. And when we get into Boasberg's rulings, what you're going to see is, some people say he's fair and impartial, and I call BS on that. And others, wrongly say that he's Democrat favors the Democrats. No, what this guy does is he always protects the establishment. That's going to be the theme for today's show. Is these are the Praetorian Guard. They protect the establishment. And when you wonder about some of Kavanaugh's rulings, keep that in mind. He's always going to rule to protect the establishment. So Kavanaugh was actually part of the investigation of Vince Foster, and they concluded he committed suicide. I know most people watching this think that's BS. Was that the 2 shotgun shots to the head?
I'm one of those that thinks that's BS.
Good. I think you're on the same case. I think we're on the same side of that.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh argued one time before the Supreme Court, and that's when he asked the court to disregard attorney-client privilege in the Vince Foster case. And we're going to get into attorney-client privilege later on, but there's a connection to that when we get back to Boasberg. Kavanaugh lost that 6-3 in the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh would go on to special counsel investigations from 93 to 99. He's involved in the Iran-Contra, the WedTech Edwin Meese, which was the Attorney General aid to defense contractor for personal gain. Part of the Whitewater investigations of the Clintons, and of course the Mike Espy gifts probe.
And that client attorney privilege is what was on display throughout the witch hunt to get Donald Trump, where they kept trying to get the attorneys part of the witnesses as opposed to honoring the client privilege. So these themes, patterns that WarHamster is talking about are literally what we're watching today.
Very much so. And a lot of the groundwork for that was set in the 90s. A lot of things changed in this country in the 90s as we switched our foreign policy and moved towards a much bigger government and national security complex. The legal system kept pace, and especially the D.C. Circuit. And I'll just say right now, the D.C. Circuit shouldn't even exist. They have jurisdiction over everything that happens in Washington, D.C. All the crimes are committed in D.C., so you're going to put a judiciary in there that's going to make sure the players never get punished. Right. D.C. is not a state. It shouldn't have a district, period. And I'm going to make that case all day today.
Okay. So
this Office of the Independent Counsel actually lapsed in 1999, and it became the Special Counsel's Office. From the Special Counsel's Office, we've had some lovely investigations like Valerie Plame, the Bob Mueller investigation of Trump, Crossfire Hurricane with Durham, and of course the Jack Smith Special Counsel, although he was never legally appointed. That's your Special Counsel's Office. That's something that needs to be addressed. How do we actually hold people in D.C. accountable? Because we don't have a formula for it right now. You charge them in a D.C. court, you get a D.C. jury, 94% of which vote Democrat. There's no formula for justice in Washington, D.C.
By design.
Yeah. That's why, I don't think people are crazy when they start talking about military tribunals. That may be the only way to get justice on some of these people. And treason is treason. Kavanaugh would end up joining the Bush team in 2000 to stop the ballot recount in Florida. He also worked on the Enron scandal, and he would go on to clerk for Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy in 93. That's your fast track to really nice judicial appointments, is you clerk for a Supreme Court judge. We've seen that over and over again.
Right.
All right, so back to Boasberg. After law school, he goes and clerks for Dorothy Wright Nelson at the U.S. Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. She's laughing because the Ninth Circuit is almost as bad as the D.C. Circuit. It got a little bit better because Trump, almost half the Ninth Circuit judges are now Trump appointees. So sometimes we get decent rulings out of there now. Prior to that, you're going to get the most wacky left-leaning rulings in history. Nelson, who he clerked for, Dorothy Nelson, was on the faculty at the Gould School of Law. Yes, that's the same Gould family we've talked about in the secret societies previously.
Wow.
But she's interesting. She's an active member of the Baha'i faith. The Baha'i are kind of a neo semi-Christian / Hindu New Age religion founded in Iran in the 19th century. And their fundamental belief is they're expecting a new prophet to come soon. There was Muhammad as a prophet, Jesus was a prophet. They're expecting a third or fourth prophet. They're kind of out there. That's why you see most of their alumni, if you go look at the Baha'i Faith, almost a ton of them are in Hollywood, just actors, writers. None of them are too prominent, but this is kind of a little whack job of a religion. I haven't gotten too deep in it, but the people who follow it are your Moonies types. So Boasberg goes into the private sector, and he goes and works for a firm called Kecker, Van Nest, and Peters in San Francisco. Kecker, Van Nest, and Peters were all Yale Law School grads. They started their own firm. They had some pretty big cases. One of the bigger law firms in San Francisco. They did McKesson Corporation versus the U.S. in a Medicare fraud case. McKesson didn't want to. They were unlawfully billing Medicare and got hit with a lot of money. They were the defense on this. They were one of the lead firms in the Oracle versus Google smartphone trial of the century. And I think Boasberg was involved in that one and the next one, SEC versus Stoker. Stoker, I know this one real well. I think it's 2007. Stoker actually worked for my old employer. I was working there at the time, Citigroup. And it's one of the very few of the financial crisis scandals that actually went to trial. He had $1 billion CDO, collateralized debt obligation vehicle that just got completely imploded, cost the investors a lot of money, but the court found Stoker not liable for putting together this piece of crap investment vehicle. Other famous alumni of Kecker, Van Nest, and Peters. The big one who stepped out was Rob Bonta, who's the current California Attorney General, appointed by none other than Gavin Newsom. And by the way, Bonta is terrible. He went to Yale, played soccer, went to Oxford. And then he went to Yale Law. We're getting an awful lot of Oxford, aren't we?
Yes.
Want to tell everyone why that's significant?
Well, the whole everything that we're talking about Skull and Bones has a mirror image in England, and Oxford is basically the mirror image, obviously there before, of the Harvard Yale kind of club that we're discussing in all of this Skull and Bones secret societies. And it appears from my research that Oxford is a breeding ground for the intelligence bridge from the CFR members and the RIII, which is the Royal International Institute or Institute for International Affairs, which is the counterpart for CFR. And so their members where we feed up to the CFR from Skull and Bones and that type of thing, the Oxford feeds into the mirror RIIA. So we're talking about parallel systems here, and we interbreed them by sending them to each other's schools.
Yeah, and we'll go into a lot more depth on that when we get into the Fabian socialists and the Rhodes Scholars. We will be jumping across the pond to get into that more, but we're setting the stage for that right now because it really does matter. There's a reason they call it the Anglo-American rules-based order.
And the Pilgrim Society.
Very much, yeah, that's coming soon. A couple more points on Rob Bonta, because being from California, I know him well. When he was a state assembly member, he got in a little bit of hot water for regularly soliciting donations for his wife's nonprofit. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Oh, you'll get more of that today. And he also introduced legislation to repeal the ban on Communist Party members holding government jobs in California.
Cool. Who wouldn't want a communist?
Well, at least the ones that openly admit it. Because trust me, we got plenty of communists in the California government. Plenty. All right, so back to Boasberg.
The federal representative sleeps with them, so.
We got a question in the chat. Any insight into Newsom's first wife? I don't think we're going to go that direction, but that's an interesting story. I don't have that on my list today, and we got a lot to go through, so I don't want to do that dig live. But there is something worth looking into, people. Okay, back to Judge Boasberg. 1995, he goes to a Washington, D.C. firm called Kellogg, Hanson, Todd Fiegel, and Frederick. These are all Harvard law classmates. And they're big telecom litigation specialists. And their most famous alumni is Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Now, Neil Gorsuch is one of the better Supreme Court justices we've had, but again, an insider. That's why you're not going to see the Supreme Court touch things like judicial review, which they should. It needs to be overturned. But they won't do that because they're always going to protect precedent, the establishment, etc. Okay, so now it's time for Boasberg to make his rapid rise into the government legal system. And he, in 1996, joins the Office of the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. as a prosecutor specializing in homicides.
Really?
Does that for, nothing too exciting. In 2002, he gets nominated by George W. Bush as an associate judge of the Superior Court of D.C. You're going to hear the media, when people are criticizing Boasberg, they're going to say, oh, he's impartial. He was nominated by Bush and then later by Obama, which is the next bullet point. And I'm here to say that Bush and Obama play for the same team. So that's not a good argument for this guy's impartiality. It's an argument that he is basically a deep state hack. Would you agree with that?
Yes, 100%.
Very good. So he serves on the Associate Judge of the Superior Court of D.C., and then Obama in 2010 nominates him to the District Court of D.C., where he sits to this day. Okay, let's go. Oh, here's a really good telltale sign that somebody is part of the swamp. His confirmation hearings, he got confirmed 96-0.
Holy moly. That's definitely an indictment.
Yeah, when every single Republican and every single Democrat senator votes to nominate you, I've got questions.
So when did he leave the homicide of the DC?
Would have been 2010 when he got, I'm sorry, would have been 2002 when he became a judge.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he was one of the investigators into a couple of the Clinton body count people or not.
Well, he was part of that when they had the DC sniper that was picking off people in the DC area, to include Washington, DC.
Looks like you got a couple new followers in the Rumble chat from Nino's show. Welcome, people.
Cool.
I love when we cross-pollinate our audiences.
I do.
Makes us all collectively smarter. All right. Okay, and he becomes the chief judge of the DC District Court in 2023. And that's important because one of the things we're going to notice, one of the biggest criticisms of Judge James Jeb Boasberg, Skull and Bones alumni, is he somehow miraculously gets himself appointed to every single important case in 2025 that has to do with one of Trump's executive orders. In 2014, Chief Justice John Roberts appoints Boasberg to the FISA court. And he would become the presiding judge in 2020 and 2021. The FISA court is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act.
Yes.
And it is a way for the FBI and our intelligence agencies to spy on American citizens. They do all kinds of shenanigans to do that. They just have to make up the slightest reason to think a foreigner can be spied upon. And if you are an American who absolutely, they made one phone call to this person, they got like the 3-hop rule, the 2-hop rule, whatever it is. And now they can spy on every single thing you do and probably everyone you call. It is absolutely Orwellian surveillance, and it needs to be banned. Boasberg's on the FISA court, which means, he's basically helped the FBI and the CIA spy on Americans for more than a decade. I've got an interesting controversy. Let me pull this up real quick. Unless you want to talk about FISA a little bit while I'm looking for this.
So I just pulled up a Just the News article where it talks about Judge James Boasberg, nominated to the U.S. District Court for D.C. by then Barack Obama in 2011, is currently engaged in an all-out legal battle with Trump. But his role as head of the FISA court, he made a number of divisive decisions, including a slap on the wrist for a member of the Crossfire Hurricane team.
Oh yeah, hold the fire on that. We're going to get into that one.
Okay.
Yeah, don't jump ahead on that, please.
Okay, I thought you were going on. All right.
No. We're going through him in chronological order, and we are not letting him get off the hook on that one.
Okay.
All right. So what I have here is an article from the judiciary.house.gov. Can you pull that up for me, please?
Sure.
Judge Boasberg keeps getting assigned Trump cases. Lawmakers want to know why. Judge James Boasberg, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court, has repeatedly been assigned to cases to do with President Trump's second term, as Town Hall has been covering. Congress has taken notice, and the House last month passed a bill to rein in rogue judges like Boasberg and others. That bill is a paper tiger. Nothing's going to come of it. Questions still remain, though, and Monday, Town Hall obtained a letter from Reps Jordan, Issa, Chip Roy regarding such concerns. The letter was sent to Angela DeCesar, the clerk of the U.S. Court for the U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia. Interesting. I've met Daryl Issa several times. He's from San Diego, and in his previous term, he was the wealthiest man in Congress. I think he made it in car dealerships or something. But I think he's one of the better rhinos in the House.
That's quite a statement. One of the better rhinos. Sorry.
Well, I've met the man, and I've asked him tough questions, and he actually was willing to answer them. So I got to give him credit for that. No, he occasionally does some good stuff. He just is a rhino. I'll just read a little bit more from this because it's important. Because this is something I want to keep in mind as we go through this. How does Boasberg become the Forrest Gump of the D.C. District Court? And always, these are supposed to be randomly assigned cases, and the dice just keep turning up Boasberg. Here's the quote from the letter. Many of these nationwide injunctions have raised concerns Article 3 judges are exceeding their constitutional authority by replacing the policy decisions of the duly elected president, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about that. It's incredibly important. As we go through the cases Boasberg's heard, remember, he is in the District of Columbia. His jurisdiction should only be D.C. Why is he ruling on stuff outside of D.C.? They say the same thing about district judges all over the country. Your jurisdiction goes as far as your district. You do not get to make national injunctions, period. And John Roberts let us down when he had the chance to make a ruling on one of the Boasberg cases. And he could have smacked that down back in March, and we wouldn't be dealing with all this garbage. But we are. So there you go. Judicial tyranny is what I'm describing. And it is systemic. Okay. Some of the controversial cases involving Judge Roberts. The first one where he really jumps off the page is in 2012. And it has to do with a austere religious scholar by the name of Osama bin Laden. This is right after the raid of Osama bin Laden's compound in Pakistan. And as you know, Obama ordered his body to be buried at sea. And the official proclamation is that was to respect his religious beliefs. But I'm smart enough to know that the Islam religion basically came out of the desert. And there is nothing in the Quran about burial at sea.
Correct.
So that was a load of crap from the very moment. So the question is, what didn't they want us to see? Did they really kill bin Laden? Has he been dead for years? They don't want us to know any of that. It's all been sealed. And I'll remind everyone that was during the 2012 election campaign And Obama was taking a lot of criticism for being weak on terrorism. And then, of course, out of nowhere, we get Osama bin Laden, and they cover it up. Yeah, thank you. I thought
they're kind of interchangeable, but go on. The CIA created both of them, so easy mistake.
Entirely possible. So Boasberg's ruling, he denied the request to order the U.S. government to publicly release the photographs and video under FOIA of the killing of bin Laden. And I wanted to pull that article up.
So he covered it up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, where do I have that article?
Because that whole thing's bullshit.
Yes.
So he's the one that helped them hide their bullshit.
Yes.
Okay.
Hang on, I got the article here somewhere. And it's worth looking at. There it is. Okay. I got a lot of screen shares today, so I'm going to be a little slow on it.
It's not over here yet. Okay, there it is.
Judge denies request for bin Laden death photos and video. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. has denied a request to order the U.S. government to publicly release photographs. He says a picture may be worth 1,000 words, and perhaps moving pictures bear an even higher value, writes in his opinion. Yet in this case, verbal descriptions of the death and burial of Osama bin Laden will have to suffice, for this court will not order the release of anything more. Judicial Watch had sued. Good old Judicial Watch had sued to see all the photos. The existence of photographs of bin Laden's body was confirmed by the Press Secretary Jay Carney and Assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, John Brennan. It should be emphasized that this was not a request for some broadly defined class of documents, the existence and whereabouts of which the agency was likely unaware, and that might be maintained in any number of record systems. If DoD has possession of these records, the relevant individuals are well aware of that fact. It's a FOIA request, and basically he's letting him slide on a technicality. So I would say that
John Brennan's word at it.
You can always trust Brennan.
Yeah.
Little Iranian connection there, John Brennan. But again, this is Boasberg protecting the establishment.
Yes.
Okay, moving on. He, of course, also gets involved in the 2015 Hillary Clinton email situation. Judicial Watch had sued John Kerry, Secretary of State, in May 2015 for failure to take action on a letter, basically demanding the letter notified him of the unlawful removal of the Clinton emails. Hillary and her top aides were using non-government emails to conduct official business. There were 31,000 emails, and Boasberg ruled that 15,000 of them could be released, which is interesting, because I'm sure the State Department and Clinton lawyers didn't cover up anything. Give me 1 second. I've got some more on that.
And these are the same emails that were then duplicated onto Uma Abedin's husband's laptop, because she was coming home with a lot of the classified emails that had been taken out of the classified SIPRNet system and scanned into a non-classified email system. And her phone was syncing with her home laptop. And that's why the Anthony Weiner laptop was so big of a deal.
Yeah, very much so. And of course, Hillary also would take a hammer and basically broke all their cell phones into a million pieces. And
after
of course, that was
bleached them.
Like what? Wiped with the cloth?
Yes, like that.
Yeah. Well, no obstruction of justice there. I really want to find this, and I'm not finding it. Okay. Yeah, there's more on this. Give me a second. This is worth finding.
Too many tabs open.
Yeah, it's true. No, it's. I've got.
I know. I feel like that every time I do Alpha Show. I've got like 10 tabs open. I have all of my notes, and somehow I have to get 3 different screens, both the StreamYard stream, my note page, and all of the tabs on a 15-inch laptop screen.
All right, I found it. Says Boasberg was ordering the processing of 1,050 pages of the FBI recovered emails by November 2016. It's during the election. Democrats are screaming that he's interfering in the election, and Republicans are screaming that he's slow walking the release to help to interfere with the election. This is a pace that was slower than the State Department's prior rate. There's like 55,000 pages.
And he was probably doing both.
Boasberg's quote, he goes, "I think we all need to bear in mind the State Department has other duties beyond FOIA requests. Sometimes I wonder if there's anything other than FOIA processing going on at state."
Just overthrowing governments. It's not like it's a big deal.
Yeah, get back to work, guys. Okay. Boasberg limited releases to non-exempt work-related emails to avoid redundant disclosures and protect Clinton's personal privacy, as FOIA exempts purely personal communications. That means the Clinton lawyers got to go through every single thing and determine what gets released and what wasn't. Do you think they were able to whitewash it at all? And of course, that would lead to the infamous James Comey saying speech where he talks about all the crimes that Hillary committed, and then says no reasonable prosecutor would ever bring charges, despite the fact that that's not the FBI's decision.
Correct.
And that's shortly thereafter, after Bill Clinton's meeting on the tarmac in Arizona with the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch.
Correct.
Loretta Lynch didn't want to make the statements, so Comey bit the bullet for all of them. And so everything Hillary did with those emails was a federal crime, and nobody ever got held to account.
And Boasberg is at the center of it.
Yeah, he's the judge. He's the Forrest Gump of the D.C. Circuit.
We have a lot of Forrest Gumps in this story.
Yeah, we really do. It's just amazing, these coincidences. All right. What do you think, everybody? This guy's got an interesting career so far. It gets better. 2018 and 19, he blocked Medicaid. He was a judge that heard Medicaid work requirements cases. Kentucky basically passed a law that said you have a work requirement to qualify for Medicaid. You need to try to get a job. Boasberg rules against it. He said that it failed to ensure the program's core objective of providing medical assistance. That's it. Now I got to put my constitutional hat on here. The founding fathers debated whether there would be a federal negative on state laws, and they resoundingly shot it down. It was not in the Constitution for a reason. It was debated at the ratifying conventions. No, this is not going to happen. Of course, it took Congress all of 2 years after the ratification. In 1789, they passed the Judiciary Act of 1789 and gave the federal courts a negative on state laws. That is one of that was one of the very first major blow of federalism in the Constitution. A district court in D.C. has no jurisdiction over Kentucky state law, period. State laws are co-equal. State courts are co-equal with federal courts. You do not get a run to daddy and sue in the federal courts every time you don't get something your way in your state. You don't like it, work to change it or move. That's federalism. But he's sticking his nose in there and basically tells Kentucky you can't pass your own damn laws. Did the same thing to New Hampshire the following year. He ruled HHS's approval was arbitrary and capricious. So that was pretty controversial. And I'm here to say that he does not have the jurisdiction. I'm making a constitutional argument. sticking that into this Boasberg expose. Someone says, I don't understand the Forrest Gump association. In the movie Forrest Gump, Forrest just shows up in the oddest places. Like he meets like 3 presidents of the United States. He's there in '69, Summer of Love, everywhere. Just this guy just happens to be in all the right places at the right times. That's the Forrest Gump thing. I hope that makes sense.
It did.
Okay. Next big controversy around Boasberg's in 2020 was the Dakota Access Pipeline Environmental Review. And they had gone through for years doing all the environmental studies, the Army Corps of Engineers. And basically the Standing Rock Sioux and some environmental groups sued in DC, mind you, not in South Dakota. And Boasberg rules that the deficiencies in the original assessment require a new comprehensive environmental review, which would mean it's on hold for years. Doesn't matter because a year later, Biden comes in and shuts it down altogether, basically costing millions of dollars. And I'm all for doing things like respecting your cultural sites and making sure your water supplies are clean. 2 things can be true at the same time. This was a eco-Nazi power grab.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Was there any information on why it ended up in DC as opposed to North Dakota?
That's where they sued. It was a DC environmental group that sued, and the Standing Rock Sioux joined on. They signed on to the suit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Judge shopping.
Very much so. District shopping, too. Okay. Also in 2020, we've got the Endangered Species Act, talking about the North Atlantic right whales. This is the black whales you have in the fishing regions of right off the coast that I'm looking at. There's about 400 right whales left in the world, so they are endangered. He rules that the National Marine Fisheries violated the Endangered Species Act by issuing a 2014 biological opinion allowing the American lobster fishery to accidentally kill North Atlantic right whales. I'm torn on this one.
How do you accidentally kill a whale?
They're black, and if you look at the adult right whales, almost all have scars on their back from like propeller incidents. They run into boats all the time.
Okay. Got it.
But, and I've got to bring this up, that doesn't mention anything about what's going on with the windmills and right whales. And Correct. If I can find it quickly, I will show you that.
Yeah, it's fine to kill them with windmills. You just can't run over them with your boat, I guess.
Yeah, I'd like to see a little consistency here. And there's the windmill boats, and they make some kind of high-pitched noise that I don't have it up anymore.
Well, one of them obviously is middle-class people trying to work, and the other one is an ongoing scam that they want to money launder. So I can definitely see where the vested interests are.
Yeah, and again, that's part of the pattern, that everything Boasberg does is going to protect the establishment. Noticing a pattern yet?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right. In 2022, he gets involved. He rules in the Stephen Wynn foreign agent case. Stephen Wynn was a Trump backer. And Boasberg, wow. What's that?
Wow.
Yeah, he actually dismissed the DOJ lawsuit to force Wynn to register as a Chinese foreign agent. And people consider that a pro-Trump ruling. There's more to that than meets the eye. And I would suggest a deeper dive into Stephen Wynn is appropriate.
Got it.
2023, Mike Pence, he orders Mike Pence to give testimony in Jack Smith's Trump investigation. And I want to here are quotes from him from the bench. While he's overseeing the Jack Smith probe into Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, and he orders Pence to testify, he overturns executive privilege claims. Executive privilege is absolute. You don't get to decide. The court doesn't decide what's executive privilege. That's kind of the way that it's been.
Well, not if they're co-equal branches.
Well, they're not co-equal branches, and I hate that term.
Okay.
That drives me nuts. And can I make another constitutional point?
Sure.
The Constitution lists the branches in order of importance. Article 1 talks about the legislative branch, and it's got the most authorities given to it. Article 2 is the executive branch, and it's got fewer authorities given to it. The third and final branch, the least important, was the judicial, and it was argued they may not even need a federal judiciary because state courts can handle almost everything. They are not co-equal. That is a myth that was given to us by the third and least important one. But there's a reason we call Judge Boasberg the most powerful man in America, because they have superseded their constitutional authorities for 200 plus years, and now we're at the pinnacle of judicial tyranny, and something's got to be done. So my apologies for getting on a little bit of a rant when it comes to this stuff. But
I think that's why people are here. They want to understand this. I certainly do. You are a constitutional expert, in my opinion. And that's why we're here.
Well, thank you. I sometimes, I do the constitutional shows tomorrow, and I sometimes don't want to overlap them too much, but that's a really important point. Yeah. Judicial tyranny is the biggest bee in my bonnet right now. So that's why I enjoyed this research on Boasberg. All right. Let's get into the FISA.
Okay.
Boasberg's appointed to the FISA court in 2014. Becomes the presiding judge from 2020 to 2021. Inspector General Horowitz issues a report in 2019 about the FISA report. And I'm going to show you that report real quick. I'm not going to read it, but.
Yeah, because it's critical.
Well, I have read it, and it's 478 pages. So we're not going to do that on this show. But we can look at the statement by Horowitz. And that's right here from the Department of Justice Inspector General. Mr. Chairman, Senator Peters, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me, blah, blah, blah. In July 2016, let me blow this up so people can actually read it. 3 weeks after then, Director James Comey announced the conclusion of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's mid-year exam. That was the Hillary Clinton investigation. The FBI received reporting from a friendly foreign government that in May 2016, meeting with the friendly government, Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist in the election process with the anonymous release of information during the campaign that would be damaging to candidate Clinton and President Obama. Which is bullshit, as we know now, and we knew then, some of us, because the entire Russia thing was dreamed up by the Clinton campaign.
And that was the Australian downer guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My favorite fun fact about that is it's the exact same playbook that the people that were involved in not CrowdStrike, forget the name of the firm that was appointed to distribute the Steele dossier. They had written an article back in 2008 to use the exact same strategy on John McCain, and Bush decided not to let them do it. So this was a plot. I'm not going to go through this whole letter because it's pretty long, but you have all the names like Bill Priestap to open Crossfire Hurricane. Every single one of these people is committing treason. And of course, Boasberg has to be involved, right?
Has to be.
So the Horowitz report reveals 17 significant inaccuracies and omissions. One is the failure to disclose that Carter Page's prior CIA contacts. Page had reported his Russian meetings to the CIA, and they kept it. They didn't report that to the FISA court. They lied to the court to get these FISA warrants.
Yeah, let me just clarify that. When people like Carter Page goes to these meetings, and they did the exact same thing with General Flynn, you are pre-briefed before you go for things to look for while you're at the meeting. And then you come back from the meeting and you're debriefed about the meeting to see if you are able to discern any of the information that they wanted you to try to observe. And all of that was done according to the normal procedures. And then they turn around and then use that, ignoring the fact that he had been pre-briefed and debriefed, and basically accused him of colluding with Russia. And the name of the company that you were looking for is Fusion GPS.
Thank you. Question in the chat. Perkins Coie, yeah, that's the law firm that dreamed it up. That put all of this into motion. They're the ones who hired Fusion GPS on behalf of the Clinton Foundation. Perkins Coie also went around the country suing states to change their voter laws to allow mail-in votes in 2020, coincidentally. Nothing to see here.
Correct.
Horowitz report said they lacked a probable cause in the third and the fourth renewals in April and June of 2017. In other words, by then, while Trump is still president, his own FBI is illegally spying on his campaign and then his administration, lying to the courts about their reason for it, and they knew it by then. And Horowitz report reveals that they knew they didn't have diddly squat, and yet they kept doing it. That's treason.
Yes, it is.
No, there's no middle ground there. That is treason. He also found that the FBI, Kevin Kleinsmith, altered an email falsely stating that Carter Page was not a CIA source. We'll get back to that in a second. So Judge Boasberg, who's the chief FISA judge, orders, as a result of January 2020, because he's so bipartisan and only cares about justice, he acknowledges there was no pretext for the third or fourth FISA ruling. But there's not going to be any consequences. Hear that motorcycle go by?
I did.
Yeah, it's a big one. So he acknowledges in an official ruling that the FBI had no pretext for 2 straight FISA warrants to spy on the sitting president of the United States, and nobody got prosecuted. Should I say that again?
Yes, please. One more time.
He acknowledges that the FBI illegally got a search warrant to spy on Donald Trump and associates and his administration, despite the fact that there's absolutely no pretext for those warrants, and nobody ever even got a slap on the hand. That's treason. And I don't need a DC court to try you under treason. That's a military tribunal right freaking there. And by the way, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have both written about this ad nauseum. They know exactly what happened for Crossfire Hurricane. And if they don't go after this, my faith in ever seeing justice is going to be diminished quite a bit. They're the 2 guys that know everything, and there's no statute of limitations on treason. Boasberg also orders that the government sequestered all evidence obtained from the 4 warrants. When the government sequesters all the evidence they gained, it renders them unusable, but also renders them unusable to future investigations. It's a freaking cover-up, Boasberg. That's not available. If Kash Patel wants to launch an investigation into Crossfire Hurricane, he has no access because Boasberg has sealed all the evidence they ever obtained. He also demanded the FBI submit a plan to address all these deficiencies. And of course, Boasberg immediately accepted the FBI's proposed reforms. And the reforms, of course, we're going to have enhanced oversight. And the attorneys are going to attest, they're going to give an attorney attestation of the application accuracy. That's it. We promise to give better oversight, and our lawyers are going to attest that the act. You mean you didn't have to, just submitting it to the court means you're attesting that it's accurate. That's it. That was the only solution Boasberg gave from all that crap from the Horowitz report. Pretty pathetic, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was pissed at the time, and I'm still ticked off.
So can I just put a foot stomper here for Perkins Coie doing my best impression of WarHamster Brady?
Go for it.
At some of their alumni, you have Weaver, who Salesforce. And Salesforce is the company that collects every single bit of customer data across all purchasing platforms. So they track all of us and all of our purchases. She's an alumni of Perkins Coie. And tell me if this establishes a pattern. Cyrus Habib was the Lieutenant Governor of Washington State. The former Attorney General of Washington State, Rob McKenna, Ninth Circuit Court, Margaret McCowan, Ronald Gould, Ninth Circuit Court, Eric Miller, Ninth Circuit Court, Tiffany Cunningham, Federal Court of Appeals, Chris Garrett, Oregon Supreme Court, Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is a Perkins Coie alumni. Do you know who Dan Sullivan is? He's the guy that replaced John McCain in charge of the National Endowment for Democracy, IRI, that funds coups around the world. An alumni of Perkins Coie.
For those who don't know, Perkins Coie is headquartered in Seattle, Washington. That's why you're getting such a big Pacific Northwest flavor here.
Yeah. And all of those things are corrupted. So go ahead. Just wanted to put that out there.
No, that's good. There was a Perkins Coie office on the building next to mine in San Diego when I had my my own advisory firm. So when you drive by an I-5, you can see Perkins Coie every single day, just south of Del Mar. It's right there overlooking the freeway.
Crazy.
And a buddy of mine's nephew graduated law school and got a job at Perkins Coie working on the patents division. And that's what you see with these big law firms. They've got so many different divisions. You know, just because you work for Perkins Coie doesn't mean you're in on the cloak and dagger stuff. You know, you got to rise up the ranks to get into the dirty stuff. They do legitimate legal work. One of the more corrupt, well, I can't say too much. I have to leave that alone. Unfortunately, I can't say what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I just know a dirty law firm here in New Hampshire. Just leave it alone. We'll leave it there. All right. The last thing Boasberg ruled on the FISA stuff is he barred the agents involved from submitting future FISA applications, citing breach of candor to the court. We caught you red-handed. Now you don't get to submit anymore. Oh, dude. Gee, what a brutal punishment.
No one held accountable.
No one. Well, here's the one person who got held accountable. Kevin Kleinsmith, who altered.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That was a slap on the wrist.
Well, that's exactly what it was. But let's listen to this. Kevin Kleinsmith altered a CIA email, submitted it to the FISA court, saying Carter Page was not a CIA source when the email said he was a CIA source. Right. Without that alteration, Crossfire Hurricane never gets launched. The Trump administration never gets spied on. It's kind of a big freaking deal. The prosecutors recommended the DOJ a 6-month in prison sentence. That's it. Boasberg sentences him to 12 months probation and 400 hours of community service, and he got to keep his law license.
I think wasn't it suspended for like a year or something like that?
Yeah, 12 months probation. That's it.
Yeah.
And now his record is expunged. Never happened.
Yeah. Crazy.
Another interesting thing about the FISA court, a little bit of conflict with Boasberg, was Mary McCord. She was the former Hillary Clinton National Security Advisor. She was the acting DOJ National Security Director head in 2016. She has a conflict of interest from that position because she was involved in getting Crossfire Hurricane. Boasberg lets her be the one to oversee the FISA reforms.
Which means there weren't.
Yeah, well, exactly. We just described that. But there's a lot of people up in arms saying Boasberg appointed her, and that's not the case. She was actually assigned by statute because of where she was. She advised the FISA court as an amicus curiae. The point being, she should not have even been there because she had a conflict of interest because she was involved at the National Security Division when they launched Crossfire Hurricane, and when the FISA court crimes were committed, she was involved and knew about them. She should have had to recuse, and Boasberg didn't let her get away with not doing so. This Boasberg doesn't really understand the concept of recusal, as we're going to see in a little bit. So let's talk about January 6th. he heard a lot of the J6 cases and was actually gave out lesser sentences, more lenient sentences than a lot of the other DC judges. Proud Boy member Mark Brew in court calls him a clown and a fraud and only got 6 years. Boasberg gave him 6 years. Some of the other judges may have given him more. He oversaw, of course, the Ray Epps case, because why wouldn't he? Forrest Gump. In that case, Boasberg is quoted as calling January 6th an insurrection. And as you and I both know, it was nothing of the sort.
And no charges for insurrection.
No, not one. The judge calls an insurrection, but nobody's ever charged with that. He also, in the Ray Epps trial, said it was not instigated by Antifa or the FBI. So how can you have a judge that does not have a realistic version of events ruling on your case? On my channel, I have had a J6 prisoner, Brian Mock, on a couple of times. Brian's an awesome guy. Got his whole life ruined by just being there peacefully. Did his time in the DC Gulag. He's out now, of course, and he's working to help other J6 prisoners get back on their feet. I've had Brian on my show twice, and I'll have him back again. Brian had Boasberg as a judge, and he told me on my show, he goes, look, the guy was fair. He let me speak. He actually helped me and gave me prompts. He goes, he goes, I was pleasantly surprised at what a fair judge he was regarding that. So I owe it to Brian to convey his thoughts on that. And the fact is, Boasberg was not the worst of the sentencing judges. But the bottom line is he sentenced people for crimes they weren't crimes. So screw that anyway.
But he's also, what do you call it when you do it from the bench? He's actually inserting information into a trial that has never been proven.
Yeah, litigating from the bench.
Yes.
Yeah, it's obscene. But everyone in DC, DC all thinks it's an insurrection. They live inside this information bubble, and he's there to protect the establishment, and of course he's got to paint the picture of an insurrection. The fact that all these poor people, the J6ers, had to get tried in DC, well, it makes sense. The crime was committed in DC, but as we've already said, 94% of District of Columbia votes Democrat. Almost everybody in DC is part of this bureaucracy, this Praetorian Guard. And J6 was a challenging of their authority, as it was the system that overthrew Donald Trump. It was not the Democrats. It was the bureaucracy. We had the entire federal FBI, CIA, all the different government agencies were conspiring to halt or stop Trump's agenda from day one. It is not just a Democrat thing. It's the establishment. Republicans are just as guilty.
Correct.
And these guys like Boasberg are there to protect the establishment. That's their only role. I'm getting heated today.
Good job of documenting that.
All right. So let's get to 2025, and Boasberg just seems to get appointed to every single Trump case. You have the Signal app case where the sensitive military discussions.
Sensitive.
Yeah, and how did he get involved in that one? Luck of the draw, right? No. The big one, though, was a 2025 Trump deportation case with the TDA. I forget the guy's name. The Maryland man gets deported. So Boasberg somehow gets that case too. He issues a temporary restraining order in the deportation. Well, he did it while walking the corridors. He said, no, they better stop the planes. And he didn't put it in writing. So the department, HHS, just kept going with their deportations. And the plane took off. Boasberg gets ticked off. He goes, how dare you disobey my orders? And we know the whole history. It's been the headline news. Now the Maryland man has been brought back to America.
You need to use air quotes when you say Maryland man.
What's that?
You need to use air quotes when you say Maryland man. He was not a Maryland man.
Yes. No, he's brought back here now to face human trafficking charges. So correct. Yeah, and we had a sitting U.S. senator flew down there to have margaritas with him.
Yes.
The whole story is ridiculous, but as you know. So this chapter is still ongoing, but I wanted to share some really good stuff on him and make sure I've got it.
I was going to say, you've already shared quite a bit of good stuff on him.
Well, someone else has done some even better digging, and that would be Laura Loomer. So we're just going to go to her Twitter thread on Boasberg. And we'll give credit where credit is due because she did the homework. All right, so Judge Boasberg's brother once said he would never enforce immigration laws, proving the Boasberg family has a history of protecting illegal aliens. Yesterday, Judge Boasberg moved to hold the Trump administration in contempt of court for refusing to halt deportation of flights to violent MS-3 and Tren de Aragua gangbangers. Judge Boasberg's brother, Thomas Boasberg, who is the head of the Singapore American School, something to look into, which is promoted by the U.S. State Department, said he wouldn't enforce immigration laws at Denver schools, where he was superintendent for 10 years before he moved to Singapore to be the head of a school with Chinese immersion program. Interesting China connection again.
What was the name of it? Singapore what?
The Singapore, I have it. Singapore American School, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so that everybody knows, most of those schools are CIA fronts.
Oh, absolutely. And let's not talk about the child trafficking part of it either, because it's definitely the case. He says, Boasberg said that schools have been viewed as sensitive locations where immigration law will not be enforced, and he hopes that continues to be the case. So we've got a family trend going here. People who grew up in D.C. Here's Loomer on March 29th saying, how come this information I exposed has still not been used by any of President Trump's lawyers for the sake of getting Boasberg to recuse himself? This is grounds for recusal. What's she talking about? Chief Judge Boasberg blocked the deportation of TDA, blah, blah, blah. I have exclusively covered a massive conflict of interest involving Judge Boasberg, the Chief Judge of the United States District Court of the District of Columbia. The judge has a daughter named Catherine Boasberg. Let me pull her up. Hang on one second. I'll have her up here in a second. Yeah, there we go. And you know where this is going. And here's the picture of the lovely Catherine. The daughter of Obama-appointed judge blocking Trump's deportation works for an NGO defending TDA and MS-13 members. Judge James Boasberg's daughter, Catherine Boasberg, works for Partners for Justice, a pro-illegal immigration NGO that receives over half its funding from USAID and or other government grants. The organization provides legal advice and representation to criminal illegal aliens. Okay.
So can I just add something about that school? The CIA got caught trying to recruit Singaporean government officials and were banned from the country. And 2 years later, that school was set up. Just FYI. I knew I'd come across that school before. I was just checking my notes.
And see, the James in the chat says, Tom Boasberg has served as superintendent of 4,000 students Singapore American schools since July 2019. Interesting. All right, so more about the Partners for Justice. I decided to have a little fun and take a look at their funding. And we type in here at usaspending.gov, keywords Partners for Justice. They got $1.6 million in obligations from the Superior Court of San Mateo. What the heck? Oh, who issued the grant? The Department of Justice, $1.6 million to this group. We'll tell you more about them in a second. And when did it come? Oh, November of 2024, right after Trump won the election. The Biden DOJ gives Boasberg's daughter's NGO $1.6 million right after he lost the election.
Right after he won the election.
Yeah, well, I meant after Biden lost. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aware that Trump won in 2020.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, let's go back to Ms. Loomer. Doesn't that blow your socks off?
Yes, it does.
So Loomer continues. Catherine Boasberg, that's okay. In her position, she helps coordinate and administer grant activities, ensuring compliance and supporting the delivery of capacity building programs to strengthen nonprofit infrastructure. Gobbledygook. Catherine Boasberg has pronouns in her bio. She goes by she, her, proving her affiliation with the left, you think. The judge's daughter focuses on criminal defense and advocacy as an employee of Partners for Justice. Partners for Justice is an organization that derives 76% of its funding from government grants. And from the Partners for Justice website, our impact, supporting those in need, transforming the system. Partners for Justice is transforming public defenders into a robust network of dynamic, people-centered service centers to reduce incarceration, increase equity, and positively impact the lives of those harmed by the cycles of incarceration, poor health, and poverty. That is pure, straight out of the Democrat, Socialist, Communist playbook. And this is Judge Boasberg, most powerful man in America's daughter. Do you think his ideology be anywhere similar to that?
Little bit.
Since 2018, they have connected thousands of people with stabilizing services and eliminated an estimated 5,000 years of jail and prison time compared to maximum exposure. How many of those criminals?
That should be that bullshit. But go ahead.
Yeah, how many of those criminals do you think have recommitted crimes or murders?
Or are here illegally?
Yes.
So your government money is being used to defend people here breaking the law by coming into your country illegally, and they're aiding them.
And here you have Judge Boasberg ruling on the Trump administration's legal rights to handle immigration matters.
Correct.
With an obvious conflict of interest, and he did not recuse himself. Nor does he ever. Partners for Justice strongly opposes mass deportations and legislation targeting members of criminal gangs, and has been a vocal critic of the Laken-Riley Act. Now, mind you, Trump's handling of the immigration is like an 80-20 issue. Most Democrats support him. You've got to be on the radical left to be on the outside of this, or on the wrong side of this argument.
Correct.
In a screenshot below, we'll get there, Emily Galvin Almanzo, the founder of Partners for Justice, tweeted an article about Judge Boasberg blocking Trump's deportations of Venezuelan gangbangers. She employs the judge's daughter. Such a close familial relationship brings into question how the judge may render decisions and how his decisions may impact the professional career of his daughter, whose employment is based upon defending criminal illegal aliens, gang members, and opposing mass deportations. It seems that Judge Boasberg has a clear conflict of interest and is obligated to recuse himself from this case, as outlined in the Code of Conduct for U.S. judges, which specifies the circumstances under which a judge must disqualify themselves from a proceeding. Judge Boasberg must recuse himself. And here's the check. You can read this for yourself. And I'll just play a real quick video.
It's your weekly video, and today I'm going to tell you about a legal loophole that lets prosecutors use different rules of evidence in court when they are prosecuting specific, usually Black or brown people. Here's what I mean. Most places around the country have some kind of gang law at this point. And a lot of these gang laws are really loosey-goosey. They basically define a gang as like any 2 or more or 3 or more people who have any kind of unifying symbol who commit a kind of crime together. Now, when you think of how teenagers are and how often kids have unified, how often did we all draw that weird S in our notebooks? And I don't know, like shoplift candy, whatever. The point is, these laws can be very broadly applied because they are very, very vague. Who are they applied to?
Anyway, I wanted to, this is her employer, Boasberg's daughter's employer,
Hey,
and she's basically.
WarHamster, did you shoplift candy?
I didn't actually, but just about everyone I know did.
No, I
was
didn't.
actually, I was actually a thief.
Okay.
But That's basically the Boasberg conflict of interest. This is one of these radical left organizations, gets funded by the government, and they are 100% that these people are the victims, not the perpetrators. And that's the mentality we're dealing with. And Boasberg sitting on the bench, there's no way he can be impartial in any way, shape, or form. As I think we've demonstrated throughout his career that he's not. He's not an impartial judge. He's not right-leaning or left-leaning. He's basically defending the establishment. Right now, the establishment wants illegal immigration. You cannot get a fair or an impartial judgment from this man ever. So we've got a guy, son of a bureaucrat, D.C., grew up in D.C., goes to D.C.'s finest grooming boarding school, for the grooming school for bureaucrats, goes to Yale, joins Skull and Bones, where he becomes one of the insiders, gets invited to all the right parties, knows the right people, knows who he is protecting when he puts on the robes, and has spent his entire career protecting the establishment from any kind of a challenge. That's your bonesman, Judge James Jeb Boasberg. May he rot in hell.
Hear, hear.
Any follow-up comments?
No, I it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But, that's really, as we go through this whole secret societies and you go through Operation Gladio, and I talk about, foundation of CIA, stuff like that, it makes it really clear that our entire government works for a small group of people and our multinational corporations. And I think you and I have done a great job of exposing how they do it. And now we're exposing who does it, who they are.
Correct.
And this is the Praetorian Guard. This is how these people are protected. As long as they're in D.C., we will never see justice in the D.C. court.
So we need to call for the disillusionment of the D.C. court.
Yeah, and Congress can do that. Congress creates the courts. Congress can defund the courts.
Except for the Congress are all paid for by these same multinational corporations invested in.
That's because just about everyone in Congress was hand-selected by the GOP or the DNC. These are the two national political parties. So you do not get local representation from your state. You get a national political party chose to be your representative. Their loyalties are to the party and not to the state. That is the problem. You've got to dissolve the party system. You do that by dissolving the party's funding system. That can be done. I've actually got it written up, the amendment. We can talk about that later. How we can defund the political parties. You do that, and the whole thing starts to unravel. But first of all, we need some justice. And it's just not going to happen in Washington, D.C. Not in a million years.
I think you've established that fact.
Very good. Shall we call it a day?
We should. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. Do you have any parting words? Do you have any shows coming up?
No, we're still doing there'll be the long series we're in the middle of with what's it called, the Madison's Notes of the Philadelphia Convention. Episodes 1 and 2 are up on my channel. You want to check those out before watching episode 3, which I think we'll have out tomorrow. But beyond that, just getting ready for next week's Secret Societies, and we'll be wrapping up probably the last few Bonesmen next week, and then we'll probably do a summary channel, and then we'll decide where to jump next.
Yes. Okay. That sounds good. So I have another show coming up a little later today, and I will put a post out about that. It will be 2:30 Eastern time, and I will resend out the announcement that Keith put out about that for everyone to be able to join us for that podcast as well. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And
Real quick, I wanted to address one comment in chat because it's important. Sure. Gigi Cray asked, is there any truth at all to anything we read in Real Raw News, which is an online news site? The person who writes Real Raw News is a Democrat, and he's got a disclaimer on the page. It says everything I write is satire. He's bragged about writing BS stories because it throws Trump supporters for a loop because it makes us believe stuff that isn't true. That's what Real Raw News is. I bring this up, and I think it's important. When I was searching for videos on Pam Bondi and Judge Boasberg, because Bondi's on to Boasberg, she's after him, I found about 7 or 8 videos that sounded like they were telling actual news stories. And at the bottom, if you read the disclaimer, it was purely AI-generated fiction, but you would never know the difference. So I'm telling you, people, you've got to be more careful right now in what you believe than you ever have in your life. You cannot believe something just because you see it on YouTube or read it on Real Raw News or anywhere. double, triple, quadruple check your facts. It's a big deal. You could have fallen for, go do a YouTube search for Pam Bondi, Judge Boasberg. Look at the top videos that come up. They're all fake. They tell us a whole story about how Bondi actually was prosecuting Boasberg. It never happened. It might happen, but it hasn't. They were reporting it as a fact. And this is done by AI can generate that so quickly. And, tell me, make up a story about Bondi prosecuting Boasberg. Next thing you know, you got a video script and the AI puts it out there. People, be careful of what you believe. Do not believe your lying eyes anymore. Double and triple check everything.
And also, just on that note, those of us who do research have tried to impart skills to other people on where to go and what to look for. And I get a lot of DMs of people saying, hey, is this true? You guys need to learn how to discern truth and not rely either on me or WarHamster Brady. That's the whole point of bringing you information and doing these digs. I've told you repeatedly that going to search engines like Yandex turns out completely different search results than others. And you really need to not be getting any news off of YouTube by doing queries like that. We broadcast to YouTube, but you have to first vet the person doing the information. And once you have discerned that person is going to do due diligence, then you follow them and you use them as a resource. But just randomly going out and watching YouTube videos because it has a particular name or topic in it is not a good way to be able to figure out what's really going on in the world.
Yeah, that's why I like to use so many screen shares when we do these, because I can show you where I got the information and you can vet that. And we always try to be very careful when we're presenting something. If it's a fact, we'll state it's a fact. If it's an opinion, we'll state it as an opinion.
Correct.
If I think it's likely to be true, I will say it's likely to be true. I've always addressed these issues using an investment approach called probability analysis. If someone gives me a theory, first thing I do, is it possible to be true? Is it possible this is true? If it's not, then we're done. If it's possible, we go to the next step. Is it plausible? Does it make sense that that's true? If it's not, we push it aside. If it's plausible, then we go on to the last step. Is it probable? Is that the most likely answer to this question? And that's probability analysis. If you go through that step with everything, consider all the other different possibilities, you usually have a pretty good idea of getting close to the truth. And that's how I approach every single one of these questions that we're answering, is probability analysis. And to do that, then you start looking. You can use the AI to give you a head start, but the AI is wrong about a ton of stuff.
Correct.
And so you really got to rely on yourself. I've got access to 150 years of newspaper articles, and I can search them. So it's not that the media is always honest, but sometimes they report something in 1943. They have no idea what they're going to need to lie about it 30 years later. So in real time, they actually get it right.
And what you find when you search on archive.org on a particular topic, you'll get 5 or 6 newspaper articles, and the farther away from the event you are, the more likely they are to be accurate. So because they do not tell you the truth when it's happening, that's propaganda. So if you're looking at the hearings that happened in 1975, going to 1975 is not the best place to look. What you do is you look at things that happened as a result of those 1975 hearings that were published later on. And what you find is the further away from the event, the more likely they are to tell the truth, because there's nothing that anybody can do about those, generally speaking, because of the statute of limitations. So they get more honest the farther away from the event you get. That's a trick that I use as well when I'm using, as you just pointed out, reading old newspaper articles. And again, it's never the headline. Generally speaking, you can go down to like the last 3 or 4 paragraphs of a long newspaper article, and they will be telling you the truth in the last 3 or 4 paragraphs, because no one gets that far after they've reinforced their bias in the first 3 or 4 paragraphs that says what they think it's going to say based on the headline. So there's lots of tricks that you can use when you're doing your research. But I have 100% of the time when I'm using old newspaper articles as references, I start at the bottom of the article, because I go back and read the first part and you're led off on a completely different tangent, and you go to the end and you go, oh, well, that contradicts everything you just said. So that's another trick.
Yeah, it's not always what they tell you, it's what they don't tell you that matters. And we'll continue to try to share our research tricks that we've picked up over the years, because we need everybody researching this stuff to get the truth out there. And the truth's the only way we overcome stuff like Judge Boasberg. You know, this is an entrenched system, but they are the few, we are the many. And, you know, truth for its own sake. That's my motto.
Yes.
And we need all the help we can get. So cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching.
See you guys next week.